Okay, so our topic is about monohybrid cross. In monohybrid cross, it is a cross of only one trait from two organisms. Example, a trait only for the eyes, the color of the eyes, it's one trait. Or example, the kind of hair, whether it's curly or straight. So we have here an example. In the example problem, we have in humans, brown eyes are dominant over blue eyes. If a couple who are both heterozygous for brown eyes reproduce with one another, will the child have brown eyes or blue eyes? Show the phenotypic and genotypic ratio. So for the step 1, we should know which characteristic is dominant and recessive. So we should go back to the problem. It says that dominant is for brown eyes and recessive trait is blue eyes. Next, dominant has a symbol, or it is represented by a capital letter. Lahat ng dominant, capital letter. So let's use letter B. So since brown and blue, so the symbol for brown eyes is capital letter B since it's the dominant. And if it is recessive, we're going to use small letter. So small letter B. Next, step 2 is determine the genotypes of the parents. So we're going to determine whether it is homozygous and heterozygous. If it is homozygous, meaning they have the same set of alleles, or homozygous example, both are capital. So, same siya. The both allele are both dominant. We can also have homozygous for blue eyes, meaning parehas silang small letter. So, this is an example of homozygous set of allele. While heterozygous, we have capital letter and small letter. So, this is heterozygous kasi magkaiba sila. Okay, so for the step 2, determine the genotypes of both parents. So the parents are both heterozygous for brown eyes, meaning they have different set of alleles. So for the father and mother, heterozygous. So we have a dominant and a recessive. Step 3, put each genotype of the parent in each side of the Punnett square. So there are 4 boxes or quadrants in a monohybrid cross. So we have here 4 boxes. For the father, we have heterozygous. So put the dominant here and recessive here. For the mother, also heterozygous. So dominant will be placed here and recessive will be placed here. Next is start crossing. Always start writing the capital letter or the dominant trait inside the box. So for the first quadrant, so we have 2 dominant traits. Both are capital. For the second quadrant, we have here a dominant and a recessive. So 1 dominant and 1 recessive. Next, for the third quadrant, we have a dominant trait. So dominant trait lagi yung inuuna natin sulat. Next is recessive. And for the last quadrant, we have here both small letters. So both are recessive. So in the problem, it states that to show the phenotypic ratio and genotypic ratio. So for the phenotype, when we say phenotype, it means it is the observable physical properties of an organism. It follows the dominant trait. So ang hinahanap natin sa phenotype, kung alin yung may dominant trait. So di ba yung dominant trait natin is represented by a capital letter. So alin dito, ilan dito sa nasa monohybrid cross, yung may capital letter. So, we have here 1, 2, and 3. So, 3 na ano? Ayan. So, we have 3. Okay, so what is that 3? That 3 means that there will be 3 possible offspring that will have brown eyes, since the brown color of the eyes is our dominant trait. And then, we have here another one. So, it doesn't have a dominant trait. It only have recessive traits. So, ito yung mag-physically express doon sa offspring na yun. So, there will be one offspring that will have blue eyes. So, the phenotypic ratio is 3:1. Next is for the genotypic ratio. So, the genotype refers to the set or composition of genes, whether it is homozygous or heterozygous. Again, when we say homozygous, homozygous means the same set of alleles or traits. So, either parehas capital or parehas small letter. And if it's heterozygous, one is capital and one is in small letter. So, we have here in our example, in our Punnett square, the first one is, the trait is what? The trait is 1 homozygous. Homozygous for what trait? Homozygous brown eyes. So, ito yon. 1 homozygous brown eyes. Next is we have here, for the second quadrant and for the third quadrant, they are both heterozygous. So, we have 2 heterozygous for brown and blue eyes. Next is we have here, the last one, it is homozygous because they are both small letters. 1 homozygous for blue eyes. So, we have there the genotypic ratio, 1:2:1. Let's try it yourself. Pause the video for a minute and try solving the next problem. For the problem, the dominant gene for the shape of the nose creates a broad nose, while a recessive gene creates a narrow one. Use letter N for representing the trait. Suppose the father is heterozygous for broad and narrow nose, and the mother is homozygous for narrow nose. What are their possible offspring? Show the phenotypic and genotypic ratio. We have here the genes of the father, which is heterozygous for broad and narrow. And then for the mother, we have homozygous for narrow nose. And then when we cross in the Punnett square, we have here the phenotype, in which we have 2 broad nose and 2 narrow nose for the possible offspring. So we have the phenotypic ratio 2:2. The genotype will be 2 heterozygous for broad and narrow nose. So ito yon. And then 2 homozygous for narrow nose. The genotypic ratio is 2:2. So I hope you got the correct answer.